Hey everyone, and welcome back to the next part of our FAQ series. Today I want to discuss a few things we're often seeing when talking about server bombs with our customers when it comes to storage and also storage networking. So stay tuned, and we will discuss those common mistakes or common caveats right now. So first is the discussion we often have is hybrid configuration, so flash storage together with HDDs, so spinning drives, versus full flash. Normally, hybrid looks rather cheap and looks rather performant against flash. But what we encountered through the last 2 to 3 years working with our HCI customers is that when seeing storage drives or HDD drives failing together with the rebuild times, repair, engineers who go on site replacing disks, even with the more capacity, SSDs are much more reliable and much, let's say, impactful to the overall environmental performance and also reliability. So if you put that in numbers, from a price to performance to reliability perspective, both are more or less equal. So what we're suggesting our customers here is if you have a lot of cold data, you should go for hybrid. So you have a lot of things, disks spinning, don't spin around that much. So your overall disks are not that highly impacted. Then yes, hybrid configuration is totally fine. But when you're working, for example, with a lot of hot data, hosting Kubernetes, hosting Azure Virtual Desktop, hosting virtual machines and not only file servers or storage or backup servers, then we normally suggest and prefer to see all flash configurations, even with a larger number of disks. That brings us to the additional caveats or mistakes we're seeing a lot. First thing, storage network. Yes, Azure Stack HCI can run with 10 gig RDMA, and you can build storage configuration and network with 10 gig RDMA. That's totally fine. That's working. But as soon as you're going for more than 3 nodes with full flash, you will see that 10 gig will become your bottleneck, especially when you're working with a lot of hot data. So you will not get the IOPS from your system you normally would get with all these storage and all these flash, because the replication which happens between the nodes has its bottleneck on the 10 gig, so you will not be able to get the full performance out of these storage disks, which could be around 1 million to 1.5 million IOPS right now. So that's the second one. So don't use 10 gig when you have more than 3 nodes in your cluster. The other and next thing is when you're buying your servers, going on small disks because they are cheaper at that time. And you think, I can upgrade the storage later on. I put some larger disks in like I did it with RAID and so on. With Azure Stack HCI and especially with Storage Spaces Direct, the smallest disks in your storage volume defines the available storage. So even if you have a 10 terabyte SSD, which will maybe affordable in the future, in your disk, in your array, and you put it also in the volume, and every disk or every other SSD is 1 terabyte, 2 terabytes, something like that. You will only have 1 or 2 terabyte usable capacity on the drive itself, because the drive is not overcommitted above the others. Because if that single drive would fail with a large capacity, there's no spare space on the other disks to put all this data on. So if you buy a server now, try to get the largest disks, largest SSDs you can have, so that you have spare capacity and you can just put in other disks or larger disks later on without having that high impact, and also saves you some space in your chassis. That's the last common mistake we're seeing quite often. Server vendors and also customers going cheap on the chassis. So if you know server chassis, they normally come within a series in different sizes. So that you can have a Dell 600X something with a 4, 8, 12, I think up to 18 disk arrays in front. Or you can even have larger with the Apollo systems from HPE, for example, or with Dell 7 series. If you go for a cheap chassis or a small chassis and you're reaching a storage limits, there's only one way to extend the storage capacity of your whole cluster: buying a new server. Which brings other issues like CPU compatibility, new generation, maybe server not available, you need to go on the third market to get a matching system. You're buying unnecessary CPU and memory resources you don't require because you just require storage. So what we normally suggest our customers is buy that specific server, yes, but buy it with the largest backplane you can have. Or if there's if you already have the largest backplane, try to get the next larger version. Like if you're at the disk limits of a HPE DL360, the one new system from HPE, yeah, then just go for a DL380, because even paying a few more bucks, a few $100 more on that specific system for the larger backplane, for the larger chassis and larger array, it will save you a lot of bucks in the future when you need to buy an additional server to extend your storage. So to summarize, our common mistakes or our common learnings we had throughout the past. First, if you have a hybrid configuration with HDDs versus full flash. If you have a lot of hot data, reliability, resiliency is with your flash. If you have a lot of cold data, archiving data running, like with file servers, yes, hybrid is fine because the impact of the overall resilience is not that high, and it's also um, not that destructive if you're losing a disk and need to replace it, because it will not happen that much like with hot data configuration. Don't go cheap on the storage network. That would be the second one. So 10 gig is fine for 2 node clusters for smaller configurations, but as soon as you're going for 3 nodes with all flash, it's always recommended to have 25 gig or more, depending on the cluster size. Also work with your vendor to learn about how many IOs you will get. So third caveat or third thing you should do is always go for large disks. Less disks, larger capacity, to later on do not waste spare capacity when you need to add larger disks because smaller disks are no longer available. And fourth and last one is go for the largest backplane you can have with your system so that you have always spare space to add additional disks, add additional drives, to extend your volumes and your storage capacity without buying an additional server. As said, we don't see quite often that memory, CPU is an issue. We are seeing a lot of storage running out. And if you have an additional spare slots, let's say you have 3 spare slots, you just buy in a 3 node cluster 9 more disks, which is much cheaper than buying a whole new server, where you then have wasted memory and CPU capacity laying around. That's all from me for today. Happy Eastern. When the video will come out, Eastern will be over. I'm capturing that on Easter Sunday. Um, if you want to see more FAQs, more of our common learnings from our daily business, subscribe to the channel, leave us a comment with your questions, ring the bell, and have a great time. Bye.